this will also help those responsible companies have better enforcement with this order so that their customers and their employees have a reasonable expectation of safety, right? You want to be perfectly safe, you stay at home. Reasonable expectation of safety you should have buying and going out. Masks help provide that. And, you know, we need to increase the percentage of people wearing masks. And I'm going to show you kind of how I came to this conclusion because I had some questions about this. Does a mask requirement actually increase mask wearing? And how does increased mask wearing in the Colorado social context affect whether the virus spreads or not? So I have some data about that. This isn't just about Coloradans. It's also about all the folks coming from out of state. This is a key slide, really, in my decision-making process. You might recall what I wanted to know is, does it increase mask wearing when there is a mask wearing order of the city or county, or in this case, the state? You know, people should be wearing masks regardless of whether there's an order. I think I've said that many times ever since we've embraced masks as a mask wearing culture. We have talked a number of times about how you shouldn't wait for a requirement. It's a rational thing to do to save your life and protect our economy, protect your loved ones. It turns out that having this kind of ordinance in place does increase mask wearing fairly substantially. Go back to the last slide, please. There's two different surveys that were done by outside groups, one CDPHE, one outside group. Mask wearing in counties with no mask order, 67%, pretty good. Colorado is pretty good. That's one of the reasons we're not a hot spot. We're doing pretty good on mask wearing. But with the mask ordinance, it went to 83%. The other study showed 49% going to 57%. Now, the other piece of information I want to know is, okay, I want to make sure mask wearing ordinances don't make people think everything's safe and they can forget about social distancing. That's very, very important. Wearing a mask complements social distancing. So we wanted to look at, are people focused on maintaining 6-foot distance more, the same, or less with a mask wearing ordinance? And it's a small difference, but the key thing for me is it wasn't less. I wanted to make sure that if the places with mask wearing ordinances, people weren't all congregating together just because they thought it was safe with the mask ordinance. The good news is, if there's any difference, people are more careful about 6-foot distances, very slightly, in the areas with mask wearing ordinances. So this data from these two different data points was key to me in deciding, yes, local requirements and county requirements can increase mask wearing, and no, it does not make people think that they can forget about social distancing. That's very important in coming to this decision. Next slide. This is even more important data. It's hard to get your arms around, but what this basically shows is that the areas of our state that have had mask wearing requirements have had slower spread of the virus. The virus has spread less in areas that have had mask wearing orders by a statistically significant amount, and that is incredibly important data point for me in making this statewide. What this also shows is even the areas with mask wearing requirements have still been increasing. So we still need to focus on that social distancing, but they've been increasing at a lower rate than the cities and counties that don't have it. Somebody mentioned, repeat the details of the mask order. It's really simple, wear a mask. I mean, you can get into the details. Basically, it's a practical way to say wear a mask. I mean, obviously no one says wear a mask when you're eating or, you know, when you're working out by yourself. But you don't have to worry about the details. You just have to know you should wear a mask when you're in public. You're going to a store, you're going to the office, you're going to a place where others congregate. You need to wear a mask. It's practical. Obviously, where you can't wear a mask, you're not going to wear a mask, and nobody would ask you to. But anywhere where you're with others, public congregation, you need to do it. It's super important. Look, we have a choice in Colorado: either more mask wearing and more attention to social distancing, or more damage to our economy and loss of life. I mean, that's an easy decision to make when you put out that that's basically the decision we have. And of course, like anybody who cares about liberty and freedom, I'm resistant to institute a statewide mandate. But it's clear that at this point in time, this is the least bad of the options that we have at our disposal. It will increase mask wearing. It will decrease the spread of the virus. It'll provide clarity across different borders. And it's the right thing to do. And I want to give you an example of how effective masks are. A recent study from Missouri. The CDC published a study where they looked at the activities of 2 hairstylists in Springfield, Missouri, who both worked while they were unknowingly contagious with COVID-19. Both stylists wore masks at the salon where they worked, and 98% of the clients that they served also wore masks. Between the two stylists, they saw 139 clients. And despite both stylists being contagious with COVID-19, and despite the close proximity of haircuts, 0 clients contracted COVID-19. That is an example of how we can have a sustainable economy and we can get our haircut with COVID-19. As I mentioned, given the effectiveness of masks, we also will be helping school districts have the personal protective equipment that they need to be able to protect their staff. We will be able to get them medical grade masks. We're going to send them to the school district building, 1 per teacher per week, and then that will complement their efforts to have personal protective equipment for their staff and increase protections for teachers and students for school districts, regardless of what the environment looks like in the area and what format the year has. Finally, before I introduce Mayor Hancock, I just want to make one final point. You know, wearing a mask is not a political statement. I don't know how in anybody's mind this became a game of political football. It's simple, it's common sense, and it's data. The virus doesn't care what political party you're in. The virus doesn't care what belief system you have. The virus doesn't care what your ideology is. The virus is the virus. And it is a threat to every single one of us. And I completely understand and sympathize with concerns of businesses and workers and the desire to stay safe. And this will help do that. It'll help people who work, for instance, in retail and public-facing environments who have been wearing masks as a requirement since they've been able to reopen. But this will provide additional protection for them, knowing that their customers, maybe 65% were wearing masks before, now everyone will be wearing a mask, and it'll help save the lives of many of our retail workers as well. You know, if you drive a car, you wear a seatbelt, you obey the speed limit, you drive sober. Doesn't matter whether you agree politically with speed limits or with drunk driving laws, but we follow the law. If you have a political axe to grind, you do that through your elected representatives. But we have responsibilities as Coloradans and as Americans to follow the law. And the mask order is the law of Colorado. As I said throughout this crisis, we're going to monitor the data very closely. We're going to take appropriate actions as we need to protect our health care, our capacity, lives, the economy, and do what we can to make sure that Colorado can remain a positive outlier with regard to a nation that is having large problems in tackling this virus in a cohesive way. With that, let me turn it over to Denver Mayor Mike Hancock. He's been a very important partner in working hard to keep the residents of our state's largest city safe. Mayor Hancock.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for this order. This is a tremendous tool for all of Colorado as we begin to continue our efforts to really get ahead of this spike. You know, when we instituted mandatory face coverings in Denver more than about 2 months ago, it was a decision based on science, as you just alluded to. Denver's health order was part of a bigger strategy to blunt the curve and the spread of the pandemic. Following the governor's guidance, staying at home, leaving only if essential for essential reasons, physically distancing 6 feet or more, not gathering in groups. These are strategies that kept Denver and Colorado ahead of the curve, and we intend to stay there. And that's why we're here today and why the governor has made this very wise move. You know, since we instituted the order, we've heard from businesses who've asked for support and signage, and we've supported that. But we've also heard from residents who report when they see a violation or someone not wearing a mask in public. And so this statewide order is a powerful, powerful tool for all of us across the state. Let me just give you one example. I shared this with the governor and Mayor Coffman earlier. Denver is one of the top 3 cities in terms of our airports seeing passengers come through our airports. Well, we know during this pandemic that people are either seeking beaches or mountains. And with the beaches really being places where there are hot spots, they are coming to our mountains. Well, if you're up in a resort in our mountains, while the staff might be wearing masks, the only tool they have is to ask for compliance for people to wear a mask, to volunteer to wear a mask and comply with that request. Well, this state order now gives them the tool to say no one has a choice anymore. We all must wear masks to protect each other. So what we're going to be doing over the coming days in Denver is we'll continue to follow up on every one of the complaints and concerns that we hear from people with warnings and citations and appeals like this, asking our neighbors to do the right thing, to comply, and to mask up. We called our regional partners and we're grateful. Last week, several mayors joined together and wrote a letter and asked for our regional partners to mask up as well. And we want to thank Tri-County Health as well as Jefferson County for stepping up to the plate. This is how we find balance and learn to live in a COVID reality, tempering our progress when the data shows we need to slow down and do the right thing. That means taking action like this when we see 80 new cases a day and not waiting for those numbers to jump to 2,000 as we've seen in other cities like Miami to react. We've seen a growing number in cities across the country. I commiserate with my friends and counterparts all over this country who are having to roll back their openings because they understand, just as we do, how devastating having to shut this economy down would be to our businesses and to employees. So with the leadership of Governor Polis and partners like Mayor Coffman, we are showing the nation how Colorado leads by prioritizing the health and safety of residents and the businesses that support our communities. So we recognize that we cannot do this alone. None of us can do this alone. And so through this order, we get the opportunity to all work together to keep each other safe. And Governor, again, I want to thank you for this because this, again, gives a very powerful tool to all of our businesses and workers throughout Colorado.
Thank you. And we have two Mayor Mikes with us. Mayor Mike Coffman of Aurora has been a very important partner as we work to keep businesses open, keep folks safe, and I'm proud to turn it over to Mayor Coffman.
Thank you, Governor. I strongly support Governor Polis's statewide face mask mandate because I believe that it is the best and that it is the least invasive and least costly public health option that is available to us to stem the spread of the COVID-19 virus. The alternatives are to shut down businesses and to force our schools to remain closed if no preventative actions are taken and the COVID numbers increase to the point where further restrictions are required. Yesterday I got a call from the Cherry Creek School superintendent yesterday morning, Dr. Scott Siegfried, and he talked to me about a mask mandate, and this is what he said. He said, when you consider the simple steps we can take to mitigate the spread of the virus, such as wearing a mask, I have one simple question. Why wouldn't we do everything possible to help ensure that students can have school this year? As a community, I hope we do the right thing to protect teachers, staff, students, and their education. And let me just say, I know there's going to be some grumbling about this. I get that. It's a mandate from government. But, you know, and yes, I get that some people are going to say this is a hardship. But let me tell you this. I meet with small businesses every day that haven't been able to open up, and then that if things get worse, will have their businesses shuttered again. That's a hardship. Children not being able to go to school. That's a hardship. So that, I mean, I think we need to put it in context. That this is really, again, the least invasive approach that we can do at this time as a preventative strategy. We have got to get children back to school. We have got to open up this economy. And that's what I fear most, is the inability to do that. And that's why I'm here today supporting the governor. Let me tell you this, before I wasn't on board when the numbers were going in the right direction. And the current strategy was just working. Hospitalizations moving down. Yes, there were more positives, but we were doing more testing. But now it's different, and now I'm worried. A lot of people are hurting. because of the restrictions that have been imposed for the time that they were imposed, and some of them are still on us. And we do food drive once a week in Aurora, food distribution drive, and we help about 500 families. And that's really the depth of the suffering that has happened. So if people think wearing a mask is a hardship, they need to think about the others in our society that have been suffering, and that would suffer more if we have to reenact even more of these restrictions and not go forward and open up this economy. So I want to thank the governor for doing this, and quite frankly, the governor and I have had calls over the last couple of weeks. Well, I've asked the governor for this. Tri-County Health just passed a mandate for the 3 counties that the city of Aurora is in: Douglas County, Arapahoe County, and Adams County. But it was done with an opt-out clause. And so it's going to create a patchwork within the Denver metro area. And the fact is, the majority of the workforce in Aurora, the 54th largest city in America, 3rd largest city in Colorado, 382,000 in population. The majority of the workforce leaves Aurora during the morning, comes back in the late afternoon. And so the notion that we can have this patchwork and it would be effective is just not possible. And that's why over the last 2 weeks, I asked the governor for action. And he didn't tell, he never shared with me where he was on it. But thank you for listening, Governor, and thank you for your action today in putting Colorado on the right track.
And yeah, you shouldn't have to like look at a map and see what jurisdiction you're in to know if you're going to be safe when you're going to the store. Workers in stores, customers, and businesses deserve to be as safe as reasonably possible everywhere in Colorado, because we care about every Coloradan, and we're all interconnected. You might live in Aurora and work in Denver and visit your kids in Thornton. I mean, they're all, we're really interconnected, and it's really important we approach public health and keeping our economy open in an interconnected way. Thank you to both mayors. As you can see, this is not a partisan thing. We are united using data, using science, Democrats and Republicans, independents, rural, suburban, urban, left, right, center, to protect people of this state and protect our economic opening. I want to reiterate, a big part of getting it right as numbers rise is also protecting those who are most at risk. And if you have pre-existing conditions, if you're older Coloradan, stay home as much as possible. If we want to help get our state through this crisis, in addition to wearing masks, reach out to an elder offer to bring groceries to their home, ask if you can be of help so that they don't have to go out. Be a good friend. Be a part of every community support system. We need compassion now more than ever, and we need those everyday heroes, including you, to step up again and again for neighbors in need. That begins by wearing a mask, but it doesn't end by wearing a mask. This will continue to be a difficult time that demands a lot of us. We wish that wearing masks was a silver bullet and solved everything. It doesn't. We have to keep up the social distancing, not have large groups, avoid interactions, really focus on staying safe. Masks are an important part of that. They complement that, but we need to do better in other areas too. And it'll likely continue to be difficult for the next few weeks and months. Now, this is the situation we are in, not the situation that we want to be in or that we wish upon it ourselves, but we must take it seriously or it will deteriorate as it has in other states. As it's written in Proverbs 23:18, for there will be a future and your hope should never fail. And look, we have a bright future in Colorado. We're going to get through this. There will be a vaccine or cure, but in the meantime, we have to live in a way that's sustainable from a social perspective, a health perspective, a psychological perspective, an economic perspective, and we are not currently living that way. We were living that way, late May, early June. We need to live like that. Masks and increased usage give us a little more freedom, but we cannot take this virus for granted. The minute we do, it will overtake us as it has overtaken our brothers and sisters in other parts of the country. We're going to get through this, but we need to step up our game, and we need to take this more seriously than we ever have. With that, we're happy to take some questions.
Governor, a week ago we sat here and you said that a mask mandate was unenforceable. I wonder what makes you think that Coloradans would listen to this mask mandate now that you've said that you couldn't enforce it. And also I wanted to ask if this is an inflection point now that we're seeing these cases rise, if we should have done this earlier and maybe we were too overzealous to loosen some restrictions.
So the two areas that convinced me that this would work is looking at the impact that mask ordinance have had, increasing mask wearing 15% over areas that have not had those ordinances. It's not so much because of the enforcement of those ordinances. They're not widely enforced, but the mere clarity of message of those ordinances in the areas that have them have successfully increased mask wearing by 15% and also led to a reduction in the spread of the virus. The state has a few ways to work with local law enforcement around enforcement. This creates a nexus to violating state laws around trespassing, which if somebody were to run into a store naked or without a mask, they are trespassing. And this gives that store the ability to call local law enforcement to enforce trespassing charge to make sure that they can keep their customers and their workers safe. And in addition, we also can make sure that businesses are following this protocol by making sure that they have that their licenses are always have to follow the health requirements. That's what restaurants and bars, not every business, but they're businesses that have to follow licensing requirements will have to follow these. So like in any law, of course, we require local buy-in and local enforcement. But the very existence of this kind of order alone, from this data that's been provided me in the last few days, I'm confident will increase mask wearing in Colorado.
Hi, Governor. This is Spencer Wilson with KKTV 11 News. I was going to check and see, what would you say to those communities like Colorado Springs that have been resistant to putting in place their own mandate, or their citizens who have been actively protesting any mask mandate?
Well, I think this can certainly make it easier on some local decision makers who would rather that the state make this decision to keep folks safe. What I think people have to remember is that we're all part of Colorado. And just because you live in unincorporated El Paso County, commute to Colorado Springs, go up to Castle Rock for your haircut, we all are in this together. And because of the interjurisdictional nature of the virus, it calls for a statewide response. The virus doesn't stop at city lines. The virus doesn't stop at county lines. We need a coordinated, unambiguous state message with moral clarity and scientific clarity. And we're providing that today. Wear a mask when you're in public and around others.
As was asked earlier, that this is a complete turnaround from what you just said on Tuesday. You mentioned that you didn't want to infringe on people's liberties, and you also said, I guess a week ago, that you did not have the enforcement that was needed to enforce such a mandate. But what changed, and how do you do this now?
Well, the two data points that helped change my mind were that the existence of local ordinances, which are generally sporadically enforced or seldom enforced, the mere existence of those local ordinances increased mask wearing by 15% in the areas of our state that have them. I am confident that a statewide requirement will also increase mask wearing in our state. And there's really no excuse not to take action. That's new information. That's based on those two studies that I indicated, and that was presented to me in the last couple of days. The second piece is the deterioration of the state, the virus, which is expanding. Hospitalizations are up, case counts are up. As Mayor Coffman said, this is the least costly and simplest intervention that we can do. It would be inexcusable in my mind to even be talking about closing down businesses or limiting commerce if you haven't even instituted a mask wearing requirement for Coloradans. And we're hoping that along with Colorado's attentiveness and taking this seriously around social distancing, coupled with mask wearing, will alter the trajectory in a way that we can avoid becoming a hot spot.
Hello, Governor. This is Vinny Del Giudice at Bloomberg News in Denver. What would compel you to order people to stay at home again? And I'd like to hear from Mayor Hancock and Mayor Coffman on possible stay-at-home orders. Thank you very much.
Well, that's not what we're talking about today. I think there's not a resident of Colorado and there's not an elected official in Colorado that doesn't want to do everything they can to avoid having to ever stay at home again for a long period of time. The way that we achieve that is mask wearing, avoiding social interactions wherever possible, staying 6 feet from others, washing your hands regularly, limiting your contacts. That's the way that we do that. Be smart, be clean, be careful. That's how we get that done. Mayor Hancock?
I repeat what you just said, and I think that's the overriding message here. We will do everything we can to try to avoid having to issue stay-at-home orders. That's not where we want to go. And it's the reason why we're all taking these very proactive steps to mitigate the spike that we are seeing in our state, but we're seeing it also around the country. We've got plenty of examples of why we want to take these steps today. And so I absolutely agree with you. We want to avoid going to that. But let me just say that we look at a body of data that help us to make some very good decisions. This is data-driven, science-driven, medically advised-driven from professionals. And so we are listening. And when we see a combination of a lot of these matrices that we monitor, I will just say that it would have to get tragically bad for us to have to reinstitute stay-at-home orders. And what that means is that we have quite a few metrics that are driving to a spike that we cannot control. Our hospitals are at very serious risk of being overrun, for example, along with the number of infection cases that are growing as well. So let's not really spend a lot of time talking about that, because our hope is that we never have to go back there. But understand that we are monitoring many matrices that will give us guidance on what decisions we have to make.
Mayor Coffman?
This is a preventative measure with such urgency, I believe, to prevent ever getting to a stay-at-home order. We lost a lot of jobs in the stay-at-home order. We are beginning to recover now, and to have another setback like that would be I think, traumatic to this economy and would hurt a lot of families.
If a business doesn't, it stands the chance of losing its license. What if an entire county decides or a city decides not to do this? Can you withhold funding?
Actually, counties have been under this order for the last few weeks. Anybody who does business in a county office has had to wear a mask. So this has already been in place for counties. I don't remember if it's been in place for cities or not. I think most cities have probably instituted something like this themselves, probably not every city, to protect their employees when customers come in. But, you know, look, we have a lot of laws in Colorado, and we have responsible business owners in Colorado who follow the law. I mean, whether it's a handicapped access law, whether it's a law to make sure that there's not, you know, dangerous asbestos that's contaminating the site. You know, this is a law like any other. It's a public health necessity. And I've heard from many business owners that have been frustrated that they haven't felt they've had the moral authority to turn away customers that aren't wearing masks. And their employees are worried about it. It's bad for morale. I've heard from some that have had employees quit because they worried that they weren't able to enforce the mask wearing requirement. This will help those small businesses make sure that their customers are safe and that their employees are safe.
Hi, Governor Polis. This is Joe Vac with Denver 7. I know when the red flag law took effect, you had sheriffs that came out and said they would not enforce that. How would you handle it in this case if anyone in law enforcement or sheriff said they wouldn't respond to a call about somebody not wearing a mask?
Well, that's where I think this also answers some of the other questions. How do you get at enforcement? I think that every sheriff takes a matter of illegal trespassing seriously. If somebody is on private property, the owner of the property says, you need to leave, you're violating our terms of service, maybe you're naked, maybe you're not wearing a mask, maybe you're screaming and yelling, maybe you're yelling, you know, fire, fire, and there's not a fire. All law enforcement is very responsive to those types of trespassing complaints that are lodged by private establishments. So I feel that that is a effective way that we can work with local law enforcement, sheriffs, and police chiefs to make sure that people are able to protect their businesses. Mayor Coffman?
Governor, we've had, the city of Aurora, I'm sure other municipalities have had experience in terms of enforcement, and our position has been not to use law enforcement for public health order, for the enforcement of public health orders, but to use our code enforcement for that. And so that could be certainly against a business that was willfully not complying by making sure that people coming into that business were wearing a mask. We haven't had an incident, but I'm sure that if it was a trespass issue where someone refused to put on a mask and refused to leave, then I suspect that would fall under law enforcement, as a law enforcement issue.
So that's not just law enforcement. The question asked about sheriffs. It's municipal codes, county codes, and state licenses. So there's a whole constellation of ways that that people can have a reasonable expectation of safety.
Governor Rick Salinger from Channel 4. As has been discussed, a number of counties and municipalities don't like being told that people have to wear a mask. Given Colorado's home rule provisions, how do you make this stick statewide?
Well, I think it's more than cities and counties that don't like being told to wear a mask. I don't think any Coloradan likes to wear a mask. I certainly don't. I can't wait till this is all over and we have a big bonfire with all these masks and we all hug each other and get together. But that's not where we are today. And I think Coloradans across our state understand that they want that reasonable expectation of safety as they go about their lives. And frankly, the vast majority of people are wearing masks, they're being careful, and it's unfair to those Coloradans that are doing the right thing that they might have somebody next to them in the aisle who's coughing without a mask that makes all of the precautions that they've taken worthless just because of that one act of irresponsibility.
Rule play into this.
Well, this, we have home rule cities, statutory cities, counties. This is a statewide mask order. Many of our home rule cities have additional steps beyond this statewide order, right? So if any, in some areas, particularly tourist areas, the municipal orders where they actually have tickets, $100, whatever it is. I think Jefferson County has a $1,000 ticket if you're violating it. This is not that. That complements this. We want to encourage, just for that, if that works for your home rule city, if that works for your county, by all means do it. This is the statewide baseline to make sure that no matter where you go, you have that reasonable expectation of safety.
Hello, Governor. Jesús Carrasquel from Noticias Univisión. Gobernador, ¿por qué antes no había dado la orden de usar las máscaras y ahora sí? ¿Y cómo hará para que las personas cumplan esa orden?
Sí. En ese momento hay más enfermedades de coronavirus desde la próxima semana y el próximo mes. Y la situación es más peligrosa en nuestro estado. No es peligroso tan estados como Texas o Florida todavía, pero sin acción la situación va a mejorar en nuestro estado. Esta es la razón que hoy ordenó que toda la gente necesita llevar tapabocas cuando estás en lugares públicos. Mike.
Yo apoyo a nuestro gobernador en esta orden ejecutiva a salud pública. Un mandato para llevar máscaras. Yo creo que es muy importante. Es la mejor manera para reducir la tasa de enfermedad de COVID-19. La alternativa es cerrar los negocios de nuevo, cerrar nuestras escuelas y yo creo que es muy mal. Otra vez, esa es la mejor manera, la mejor política.
I'm looking at the exemptions for the statewide order right now, and I wanted to ask, why are public safety personnel, specifically law enforcement, exempted from the statewide order?
Generally speaking, our municipal police departments, our sheriff's deputies, our state troopers wear masks for their safety. We have some fine gentlemen here in the room that are wearing their masks. There are times when law enforcement needs to vocally project across the distance or engage in loud communications or orders, and I wanted to make sure that in no way does a mask order reduce public safety. So they will have the discretion within law enforcement to keep their officers safe, and they will do so when possible, but there are times when wearing a mask is incompatible with the public safety requirements of serving in law enforcement.
Hi, Governor. This is Kara Mason from the Sentinel in Aurora. As much as we want to say masks shouldn't be political, I think we know that they are. So given that, do you think it's a safer bet or more effective to have these orders coming from you, somebody who was elected by the majority of the state, rather than local public health departments?
I do think that might influence a few people. I know there's been some that it rubs the wrong way, that somebody who might not be accountable directly to the public issues the order. So I hope that there's a broader compliance with a statewide order, as perhaps there are with municipal orders that elected officials do. I think that could very well be a factor for some people. Look, whatever gets you to wear a mask, wear a mask. I hope it's just very simply the argument that you're saving lives and could be saving your own life, saving our economy. It's the law. There's a lot of reasons to do it. It's important that everybody wear masks and stay 6 feet apart from others whenever possible.
Governor, clearly we're in some level of crisis here, maybe not as bad as other states or as bad as we were in earlier. So given that, why is now the time that you've decided we should no longer be under an eviction moratorium? And do the rising numbers motivate you to reconsider that in any way?
So I want to be clear, we're trying to act proactively to avoid a crisis. We have capacity today in our hospitals. The rate of infection has increased. I think today alone over 500 people tested positive. We were down, as you know, in the 200 range. Hospitalizations are up, but we are not at crisis levels. We are not in a hot spot like Texas or Florida or Arizona or parts of California. We hope that by making these changes now, by instituting required mask wearing, by re-emphasizing the need to be 6 feet away from others and to reduce your social interactions, if Coloradans do these things, we hope to avoid the kind of situation that South Florida is in and that parts of Texas are in.
For the state, I mean, even if it's not a full-blown crisis, whatever word you want to call it, there's a lot of people vulnerable now to eviction for the same reason that they might have been when you issued the moratoriums a couple months ago. So why did you drop that policy?
Did you understand what you say? No. Okay. So, yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about the economic, I guess, aspects rather than the health aspects. I mean, currently, the only kinds of businesses that aren't able to really open in our state are nightclubs and bars. And that's because I don't think anybody's figured out how we can have that kind of social environment that is the core value proposition of those businesses like a nightclub in this pandemic environment. I hope we figure it out. I hope other places figure it out. But other than that, people generally should be back at work and earning money. Restaurants, and not that they have the full demand that they always have, and some stores are doing more business, some are doing less business. Obviously, we have a higher unemployment rate. While we're doing better than the country, we're doing worse than we did as a country, even during the Great Recession. So, of course, there's economic difficulties. But the goal of what we're announcing today is to hopefully prevent the health situation from deteriorating to the point where it destroys jobs and hurts our economy more.
Hi, Governor Mary Ann Goodland with Colorado Politics. I have a two-part question. Can home rule communities opt out of this? And if not, what's the legal basis that this order is on?
Were those two questions, or was that one? Was that both of them?
It's a two-part question.
Okay. So there is no opt-out. We talked about the interjurisdictional nature of Colorado. I mean, if you live in Aurora and you commute to Castle Rock and you go to a workout in Denver, I mean, you need that two things. You need that reasonable level of safety no matter where you live. Number two, it affects the public health situation everywhere in the state, the actions you take anywhere in our state. And three, clarity of message, right? people shouldn't be like inspecting a map to know where it's safe to go to the store. Colorado's open for business. Colorado's doing it in as safe a way as reasonably possible. Statewide clarity, moral clarity, health clarity, no matter where you live, no matter how you work. While we're pausing variances, we are still continuing if areas of our state or counties are ready to enter protect our neighbors phase. In the protect our neighbors phase, which is the maximum reopening at the county's discretion during the pandemic, and that just opened that process, and I think some counties are doing that. They can drop the mask wearing requirement in that area, just as they can have other activities in a larger way. That is very unlikely to be the case for the Denver metro area in the near future. However, there are areas of our state that can show sustained low virus count and meet that criteria to be able to further open and enter that phase, in part because they have less mixing with other areas of the state.
Aisle 7, they went into the grocery store with the mask on, they decided to hell with it, going to take it off. Are you encouraging those businesses to call law enforcement or somebody in aisle 7 with them to call 911? How do you see that working? Because it seems like that's going to happen.
I would just encourage Coloradans not to be stupid and not to do that. I mean, it's not so much the fear of law enforcement that is leading to people wearing masks. It's the desire to protect your own life, it's a desire to protect the lives of your loved ones, and it's a desire to have a robust economic recovery that leads people to wear masks. I think that this clarity of message will help because it is directed at those that may wear masks part of the time, may leave them at home, may not wear them correctly. We want you to know that bipartisan leadership of our state wants you to take this more seriously, and that's the message that we're sending today.
I love this questioning that's going on, Stephan, and not just you, but everybody about what if, can a city opt out? Can we do this? The reality is I think it says a hell of a lot more about the person unwilling to wear a mask than it does the person wearing the mask. The reality is that I say a lot about how I think about you when I put my mask on and the fact I want to protect you. And when I see you without a mask, you're saying what you think about me. And that's really unfortunate because I think, as Mayor Coffman pointed out, this is the easiest, least expensive thing we can do to demonstrate to one another the importance of how I care about you, but also how we can begin to stunt the spread of this virus. And so let me just share with you briefly how it works in Denver. If I am a patron of a grocery store and I see you take your mask off, I can come to you and say, hey man, would you do me a favor, put your mask back on? Or I can let management know that there's someone in your store without a mask. And management now, under our order, but now certainly under state order, has a responsibility to either require them to put it on or ask them to leave the store. And then if they choose not to do that, then it becomes a different situation. But the reality is, this is not a criminal thing. We're not trying to do criminal compliance. It's civil, and two, we're asking you just to do the right thing for all of us, based on humanity. And so, again, I think it says a heck of a lot more about the person who doesn't want to wear a mask, who wants to politicize it, who wants to make it about liberty, when in reality it really is about humanity, about protecting one another.
Aurora, in enforcing past restrictions, did not use law enforcement resources, but code enforcement resources. Obviously, I have to sit down with City Council and decide how we're going to move forward with this particular mandate, but my guess is it will be the same.
If you would, for the sake of our viewers, your feed cut off right after you said that it would go effective at midnight. Would you just give the specifics of what you're saying today? Our viewers at home did not hear that. And then the second part of that question, the second part I have is, would you also now reconsider perhaps doing something to stop visitors coming in from other states or quarantining them when they come in?
So this statewide mask requirement starts at midnight tonight, where Coloradans, whenever they are in a public place, going to the store, a business, an office, will need to wear a mask. That's already been the case in about 65% of the state where people live. This now will apply everywhere. So both employees as well as customers will have that reasonable expectation of safety, right? Now, if you want to be perfectly safe, you're staying at home and avoiding social interactions. But if you want that reasonable expectation of safety, if you want to go about your life, but you want to do it in as safe a way as reasonably possible, that will now be the case throughout the entire state of Colorado. So Colorado, as part of the United States, has no ability or no knowledge of who comes in and out of our state. We border a number of states. We're landlocked. The key aspect is, while there are people that are likely bringing the virus, we have to make sure that they don't spread it to people here. The mask wearing will be an important part of that. It's important to educate tourists to make sure that they know that they are subject to this, that when they're within our state. We're working with Denver and Denver International Airport, other state entry points, to make sure that everybody entering our state knows that they have to wear a mask when they're around others in Colorado.